Evening, everybody. Chag Sameach.
Kabbalah,
Sameach.
how are you?
Baruch Hashem.
Goody.
Okay. Okay, looks like we're doing Zayin today. Yes, so we already said in the Torah, u'mitzvah le'anicha b'tefach hasamuch lepetach. We said, right, that there's a mitzvah to place it right next to the door, within a tefach, right, which is like, 8 centimeters. So as we said, right, what that means is that as you're coming into the house, the mezuzah would be on the right side as you come in, and the menorah would be on the left. So this way you're like surrounded with mitzvot when you come in. That's what he's talking about. And as we said, right, in the old days, the custom was to put it outside, as opposed to now everybody puts it inside almost. Okay, so it says here in the Bet Yosef, he brings a source for this. Mem Rasham, it's a Gemara there, Chapet Amud Bet. And as we said, right, this comes from Masechet Shabbat. Uperesh Rashi explains, Mitzvah le'anicha bechatzer o bershut harabim. So we're talking about placing it in your courtyard or your, right, or in the street, outside. Betefach hasamuch lepetach, right next to the door. Shem yarchikenu lehalan min hapetach eno nekar shebal habayit hanicho sham. Because he says, right, if you distance it any more from the door, it's not so recognizable that the owner of that house, the dweller there, placed it there. Could be somebody else, whatever. Then he goes on, as we said, right, the proper thing to do is put it on the left side. So the mezuzah is on the right, and the menorah is on your left. Right? Where's the source for that? Maskanat Gemara Sham. It's also the conclusion of the Gemara there. Then he goes on, Mash Katab B'Shem Avi Ezri, that which he wrote in the name of this rabbi, Shem En Sham Mezuzah Bepetach Menicha Miyamin. Oh, so he says, right, if you have a doorway there, and there's no mezuzah there, right? So then what do? Put it on the right side, because right, the only reason you're putting it on the left is because the mezuzah is on the right, so you want to be surrounded with mitzvot, But since you have no mezuzah, then why not put it on your right, which is the right to the better side? The right is always the better side. Left is the is the inferior side, right? So then you should put it on your right side. That's what he says. Um, so now I ask you a question, right? Why wouldn't you have a mezuzah on your door there? Anybody have an idea of what's going on there? Why wouldn't you have a mezuzah?
No lintel.
Oh, no lintel. Ah. Well, usually you do because, if there's a door, there has to be a lintel. So then what's the story? So, let me tell you a funny story about this, by the way. That's why I stopped because I wanted to tell you. Uh, there are some doorways that are absolved from mezuzah, right? Of course, as you said, right? Obviously, if there's no lintel, there's no mezuzah. Where are you going to put it, right? You can't hang it in the air, right? But we're talking about a normal doorway which has a lintel and everything, obviously. So then what's the problem? The problem is that sometimes, when you're going in to the house, there's like a little entrance way there, some kind of a little, right, little small room, like entrance room, whatever you call that, right? And it's absolved from mezuzah. So sometimes that can be because that room is like very small. So as I hope you know, or if you don't know, I'll teach you now, right? That if the room is not 4 by 4 amot, right? So then it's absolved from mezuzah. So if that little, like I called it entrance, right? But it's like a coat room basically, right? That's what we call it today, right? A little coat room there, you hang your jackets there and stuff and your coats and you put your shoes there, if you're Bukharian, right? Bukharians like to put their shoes outside the house. Then they walk in, right, with their socks, right? Whatever. It's like an Oriental thing, whatever. So Oriental people like to do that. They like to leave the shoes outside, right? It's like a place for shoes and your rain boots and all kinds of coats and stuff like that, right? So usually, that room is quite small. So if it doesn't have 4 by 4, you don't put a mezuzah there. So let me tell you something funny, right? One time, when I was living in Jerusalem, there was a friend of mine there who, also came from New York, and he joined us there. We became friends in New York, and then he came and joined up with us in Jerusalem and moved there too. So what happened was that happens to be Bukharian, by the way. Same thing. Anyway, right, he's Bukharian. So what happens is that he moves into an apartment over there, So we had the same rabbi at that time. There was a certain rabbi that we had. It was the same rabbi, not Maran Rovadia. It was a different rabbi before I met Maran. That was in the older days, right? When I first came there for the first 3 years, I wasn't in the kollel of Maran there the first 3 years, and then I moved over after 3 years. So what happened was that we had the same rabbi. I introduced him to my rabbi. I told him, this rabbi, that's my rabbi. You want to take him? Take him. So okay, so he took him. So this rabbi, one of those clever rabbis. So what does he tell him, right? He moves into an apartment and he had like one of those coat rooms when you come in. A little small room there, when you come into the apartment. And so this rabbi, being the clever rabbi that he is, he tells him, he says, don't put a mezuzah there, it's absolved. It's a small room. Oh. So, being the loyal, right, disciple that he was, this young man, he doesn't put a mezuzah there. So, okay, well, everything is good, right? It's good to listen to your rabbi, Baruch Hashem. Whatever he tells you, right? If he tells you black is white and white is black, you gotta listen to him anyway, right? Your rabbi. So he told him, white is black, basically. That's what he told him. Don't put a mezuzah. Oh my God, no mezuzah. So what happens, right? All the neighbors now start passing by the apartment, and they notice there's no mezuzah there, and all these neighbors are not so, clever like this rabbi was. So they're like, oh my God, who moved in here? What is this? What is this? Some kind of a right some kind of a heretical guy, doesn't put a mezuzah on his door. Oh my God, So these neighbors, start knocking on his door. and saying, "Excuse me, sir, you just moved in. Ah, welcome. Where's your mezuzah? What happened? You don't put a mezuzah on your door? What kind of Jew are you?" Right? So what happens is that these Jews, he tells them, he says, "My rabbi told me not to put one there." So okay, he doesn't put one. So what happens is, these neighbors of his, they have their own rabbi also. You know what I mean? They're one of the neighborhood rabbis there, right? Rabbis of the neighborhood, who's also, quite a accomplished scholar he was, whatever, but not as sharp as this rabbi. This guy rabbi is a little bit sharper. So anyway, right, they go to this rabbi, and they ask him. They said, this guy told us, his rabbi told him not to put a mezuzah on his door. What kind of thing is that? What kind of Jew is that, right? So what happens is, right, that now they come back to this guy. They tell him, they said, well, we spoke to our rabbi, and he told us that you have to have a mezuzah here, sir. So that's the way it goes. So what happens right now? It gets down to the rabbis themselves. You know what I mean? So this guy tells these guys, right, the neighbors. He tells them, listen, I'll give you the number of my rabbi. You can call him. He tells them, I don't know nothing, about this. I'm just following what my rabbi says. So so what happens is now they give their rabbi the phone number of his rabbi. So now we get to the rabbis, right? So they start to communicate with each other, sending letters and stuff, right? All kinds of stuff. So in those days, emails were not so common like they are today, or whatever. This was like more than 20 years ago. So anyway, right? The rabbis didn't do emails at that time. Now everybody does emails, right? Whatever. But in those days, only the cool guys did emails, not the rabbis. The rabbis weren't that modern yet. So anyway, right, they send each other letters, blah blah blah. It turns out, right, that this neighborhood rabbi that they hold by, he thought that he should put a mezuzah there, even though the room is small. So the this rabbi, right, gives him his proofs, and this rabbi gives him his proofs. So they went back and forth. You know what I mean? So each one held his stand, right? Whatever, each rabbi, whatever. It is what it is, right? But it was really funny, because it turned into a whole scandal, just because this guy wouldn't put a mezuzah. It turned out he was right, by the way. What this rabbi said, he was right. You're not supposed to put a mezuzah there. The room is too small. Simple as that, right? Nothing. There's no big secret there. So anyway, right? Why do I tell you all this? It was just a funny story. The whole thing turned into a whole big scandal. But then it started going back and forth and blah blah blah, letters, this and that, threats, blah blah blah, all kinds of things. So I think in the end, what this rabbi told him to do? He says, you know what? Since these neighbors are complaining to you, like just put a mezuzah case over there. Without a mezuzah, they'll think you put a mezuzah there. So I think that's what he did in the end. He just put a case there, with no mezuzah inside. Whatever, for the sake of peace, for peaceful relations, whatever it is. Anyway, right? Why do I tell you that? Because there are, that's what he's talking about here, right? There are places where the place is absolved from a mezuzah. So, in a case like that, you should put it on the right side, the menorah. That's what he's saying, right? Why not? Why should you put it on the left? What's the point? What will be the purpose of that? You know what it is, right? That according to the Kabbalah, the Zohar Kadosh talks about this all the time. The right is the side of kindness, and the left is sign of din, judgment. So always, the kindness is better. The right side is better. It's more superior. That's why we prefer to have on the right side always. But just when the mezuzah is on the right side, so then we will put by default we put the menorah on the other side. This way you're surrounded with mitzvot. Okay, so anyway, right? Getting back to what we said. שאם אין שם מזוזה בפתח מניחה מימין, כן כתוב בהגות מרדכי. That's what it says also in this book. Same thing, בשם רבנו יקיר. ובספר המצוות קטן כתב. So he writes in this book, ספר המצוות הקטן, שאם מניחה בדלת עצמה, יניחנה בחציו של כניסה. Oh, so he says, if you're going to put the menorah in the door itself, like you have like a thick door with some kind of, pocket there or something, whatever, God knows. So then you should put it on the side of the entrance, right? On the half of the entrance, he says. B'siman Reish Peh, he brings the source for this. V'katvu b'shem Marav Yitzchak Avuhav. They wrote in the name of this rabbi. Yesh mefarshim mechetzio shel petach keshenechlekena leshnayim. We're talking about the half of the door when you divide it into two. Nasim ota bechetzia shel haknisa. Put on the side of the entrance. Shehu letzad panim, which is the inner side. V'yeh latzad small, going to be on the left side. אבל לשון ספר המצוות, but the language of the ספר המצוות, הוא יניחנה מחציו של כניסת הבית. He's going to put it on the half of the opening of the house, whatever, the entranceway. לצד שמאל, on the left side, ונראה שפירושו, it seems like he explains, כך, כשיכנס לבית יחלוק מפתן הבית לשניים. He means to say, he says like this, right? When he comes into the house, you're going to, divide up the threshold of the house, right? Which is like the bottom, part where you walk in, right? Like whatever that's called, that's miftan, they call it in Hebrew, right? There's a name for it in English. It slips my mind. Anyway, right? So it's just the opposite of the lintel, right? Because the lintel is the top. And the bottom has also a name, right? Like a threshold, whatever it's called. Anyway, so you put it on the inner half. מחציה של כניסה שהיא לצד שמאל, so you put it on the left side, the inner half. יחשב מחלק השמאל, it's going to be on the left, considered the left side. וזה יהיה לצד שמאל עד כאן, it's going to be on the left side. That's language. וזה לשון המורדכי. The language of Mordechai is בטפח הסמוך לשו"ת הרבים. It's going to be on the tefach, right, which is the 8 centimeters close to the public domain. וכן בדלת עצמו, so the door itself, מניחה לצד שמאל. You put on the left side of the door. של כניסה, where you come in. Okay, interesting. Then he goes on. מה שכתב שמניחים נר חנוכה בבית הכנסת. Oh, so now he says, right, what about this that he wrote, the Torah, that we also place, another thing, which is that the custom is nowadays, for hundreds of years already, by the way, we have this custom, which is that we also do the menorah, to light the menorah in the synagogue. Even though, by the way, the Talmud doesn't say to do this, to light in the synagogue. When it comes to the laws of Talmud, we only light in the house, basically, right? At home. But then the customs began also to do it in the synagogue as well. So says Bet Yosef regarding this, this is, by the way, an interesting topic, this whole thing about placing, doing the menorah in the synagogue. So he says, it seems like they decreed this because of the guests, right? So what are we talking about here, right? These are people who are travelers, right? Lodging here and there. And, in those days, they didn't go to like hotels and stuff so much, So what they did was they would stay in the synagogue. The synagogue was like the local hotel there. Like the inn, whatever, right? So the little local motel was the synagogue. So the Jews would come there and lodge there, people who didn't have a place to stay. So therefore, right, says Bet Yosef, it seems like they made this custom to light in the synagogue in order for, for these people to have a place, right, to do their Chanuka. Because, basically these people are like homeless. They don't have a home. They're away from home, whatever it is, right? They don't have a house. They don't have a place to stay. So they need somewhere to light. So therefore, the rabbis, decreed at a later time, right? They enacted that people should also light in the synagogue as well for the guests, for the lodgers, right? Okay, good. So then he goes on. וכמו שתיקנו קידוש בבית הכנסת. Same concept as like, they also said, right, to do kiddush in the synagogue. It's same idea, for the guests. What does that mean? To do kiddush on Shabbat, right? That's what we're talking about. Until this day, by the way, there are many synagogues that do this, even though a lot of them have stopped it, but still many of them that do. So anyway, so he says, "Mishum de'orchim de'achlu v'shatu b'beit knishta." These are people who are. This is for the people who are eating and drinking in the synagogue, right? They're lodging there. V'chein katav kolbo, right? That's what it says in the kolbo. Katav od tam acher. So he brings another reason there. Shu kedei lefarsem anes, in order to publicize the miracle, right? Because a lot of people come to the synagogue, So, in other words, if you didn't catch it at home, if you didn't do it at home for some reason, let's say you're not very religious or whatever, whatever. So we'll catch you in the shul, right? We'll make sure you catch it in the shul, just in case, right? We'll back you up in the shul. That's what it's all about. Okay, so Katav kolbo. That's what it says in the kolbo. Katav od, it writes furthermore, tam acher, another reason, shehu kedei lefarsem anes b'fnei kol ha'am ולסדר הברכות לפניהם, שיש בזה פרסום גדול להשם יתברך וקידוש שמו. So he says that there's a lot of publication going on, publicity, right? That you're doing in the shul, everybody's there. So it's a good thing. And it sanctifies the name of God, that we bless him there, right? And what it says also here in this book, in the Rivash, so he says this custom, right, to light in the synagogue, minhag vatikinhu. So it's an ancient custom, right? Whatever, enacted a long time ago. It's because of publication of the miracle. כיוון שאין אנו יכולים לקיים מצווה כתיקונה להדליק כל אחד בפתח בית ביתו. So he says the reason is because not all of us can light at home. At the doorway at the entrance of the doorway, as we mentioned, right outside. שאין אנו יכולים לקיים מצווה כתיקונה להדליק כל אחד בפתח ביתו מבחוץ מפני שיד האומות תקיפה. Right, so he says the reason is because there's a lot of vandalism going on, and the goyim are giving us problems, right, when we light outside and so forth, so on. So he says we bless on it as well, right? כמו שמברכים על הלל the Rosh Chodesh, just like we bless on the Hallel of Rosh Chodesh, even though it's only a custom, אף על פי שאינו אלא מנהג. ומכל מקום באותה הדקה של בית הכנסת, אין אדם יוצא בה וצריך לחזור לכל אחד בביתו עד כאן השלום. But says the Rivash over here something interesting, right? That even though we do light in the synagogue, and all the stuff that we mentioned, but he says, nevertheless, you don't really fulfill your obligation by that. So therefore, you have to go home and light at home as well. In other words, don't just say, yeah, we already lit in the shul, so we're good. No, says the Rivash, you're not good. That's just a custom, But the real decree is to light in your house, So therefore, right, go home and light there as well. There, right, there's different opinions about why the enactment to light in the synagogue was made. So therefore, right, practically speaking, says Ma'an, my rabbi, Ovadia, in his book Chazon Ovadia, he says there that therefore one should only rely on the lighting of the synagogue if he has no home, to light that night, whatever, for some reason. As we said, like let's say, for instance, he's away from home, he doesn't have a place to stay, right? So he doesn't really have a home that night, whatever. He's homeless for, permanently or temporarily, whatever it is, right? God forbid. So because of that, he has nowhere else to go to light. So therefore, says the rabbi, a person like this can rely, on the synagogue, the lighting over there. But a person who doesn't have this problem, he's got a home, he's got a place to stay, so he should go home and light at home as well, because that's not really going to do the job. So okay, that's good to know. Very good. Um, let's go on a little bit. So he says, "Mash katav shemenicha bedarom zecher lemenorah." So another thing the Torah said, which was what, that a person, when he lights the menorah in the synagogue, right? When you light in the synagogue, you should light in the south side, right? Why is that? Because that's the way it was in the temple, right? In the tabernacle, in the holy temple in Jerusalem, at the Bet Hamikdash, they used to light it on the south side. So therefore, right, in order to commemorate that, you should light on the south of the synagogue. So in most places, right, most synagogues, we're praying towards the east, right? So therefore, right, if you're praying towards the east, the menorah should be on your right side, right? As you pray. That will be the south, right? Going to Florida, right? Going down there, right? Figuratively speaking. So that's the way it goes. So yeah, that's the way it should be. So regarding that, says Maran Bet Yosef, בטומאת הדשן כתב שיש מקומות שמסדרים אותם בין מזרח למערב. Says there, and it says in this book that there are places where they put it between the east and the west, right? Whatever, one or the other. ומקומות אחרים מסדרים אותם בין צפון לדרום. Some do between north and south. So he brings here different customs, right, about this. Probably because, the reason why this is because they live in different areas, so they're positioned differently regarding Israel. Probably that's the reason why. So it says it really depends on the machloket, right? The dispute of the Tanaim. בפרק שתי הלחם, over there in מנחות צדיק עמוד ב', it says over there, נרות טליה בפלוגתא דתנאה, בפרק שתי הלחם, נרות המנורה, היח היו מונחים, והיה נראה דהילכתא כרבי מחברו. So he says over there's a machloket, there's a dispute in the Gemara, where in the temple, right? The question is, where was the menorah placed? Which side? So there's a dispute there. So according to that dispute, that also affects our discussion as well, right? So he says the halacha seems to be like Rabbi, right, over his right friends, the rabbis. That's what it says in the Gemara Eruvin, Mem Dav Amud Bet. V'chen Piresh Rashi Alibeh. Rashi also explains like this. בפירוש החומש, the פירוש של החומש. אמנם הרמב"ם, but the Rambam says וסמ"ג, and the Samag, כתבו דמצפון לדרום היו מונחים. So he says, right, the Rambam, that the menorah was placed between the north and south. צריכים אנו לסדר הנרות כמו שהיו מסודרים בנורא. So you have to do that as well in the synagogue, right? In Chanuka, למור כדאיתלר, למור כדאיתלר, according to each opinion. ונערה נערה ופשטה, so there are different customs, as he says, right? אמנם אם הייתי במקום שאין מנהג, but it says בבית יוסף over here, right? If I was in a place where there's no custom, in other words, there's no established custom there, which opinion they go like, right? הייתי מנהיג כמו שראיתי ברוב המקומות. Says I would do like most of the places do, which is קרבי מחבריו עד כנשנו, והמנהג הפשוט לקבעה בכותל דרום ונמצאו מסודרים. So he says the custom nowadays is to put it, as we said, right, in the south. Then בין מזרח למערב. So what does that mean? That it's between right, east and west. Okay, good. So that's the story there. Let's see the Shulchan Aruch and we're done. So it says in Shulchan Aruch, mitzvah le'anicho b'tefach hasamuch lepetach mismol, right? First of all, we said, right, it's a mitzvah to put it next to the door, right? As we said, kedei sheteheh mezuzah miyamin b'nei Chanuka mismol. Why is that? Because we want the mezuzah on the right side and the Chanuka on the left side, right? As we said, most people don't do this today. We already mentioned this, right? Most people do it on the window or on their table. But there are still some people who do it by the door. So what does that mean? Not outside, right? We're talking about inside the door. So when you come in, to the house, the mezuzah is on your right, as we said, right? And your menorah is on the left, and everything is inside the house. Right? Some people don't do it this way. Probably the reason is because what do you call it? There could be several reasons. First of all, if a person lives like in an apartment building, right? This wouldn't be such a good idea because this way people don't really see it outside. So there's less publicity going on there with this kind of a thing. Even though your neighbors may see it, but that's not perhaps the ideal thing. We want everybody to see it. That's one reason why. Another reason could be the reason why they don't do this today is because sometimes what happens is that when you open the door and as you come in, the wind blows it out. So that would be a little bit of a problem, right? Whatever. So practically speaking, sometimes it's not so practical. So also some people who have little children in the house, what happens is that when you do it this way, right, they could knock it over, because you're not putting it on the table. You're not putting it on like a sturdy place. So because of that, it could get knocked over, over there, the children running by and this and that, all kinds of things, practical considerations like this, whatever. So that's why most people today don't do it this way. But it's still a mitzvah to do it, I mean, theoretically, in theory, in practice, I'm not so sure. Right, whatever, not really the most right practical thing. But anyway, right, most people prefer to put it on the window. That has its own rules, by the way. We're going to discuss that probably a little bit later, right? Because that has its own issues as well. When you put it on the window, what's good to do, what's not good to do, and so forth and so on. But we'll deal with that probably some other time. The ein mezuzah bepetach, right? I mean, as we said, right? If you have no mezuzah on your right side, as we said, right? You have one of those small coat rooms or something, whatever. So in a case like that, you should put the menorah on the right side then, right? There's no reason to put it on the left. So there's no no little thing there. So that's one thing, right? And it says the Ramah here, Umiu bisman hazeh, so he says, Ba. So comes the Ramah and says, wait a second, right? He wakes you up over here, the Ramah, right? Shekulum madlikim befnim. But nowadays everybody's lighting indoors, right? That's the thing, So it's not what it used to be, right? This whole thing. So therefore, he says, then so he says, therefore, if you put it inside, there's really no big deal, because people outside can't really see it. You're not really publicizing the miracle so much, by putting it there. So he says, therefore, so he says, therefore, there's no really big concern if you don't put it there, by the door. בפתח סמוך לפתח. בכל מקום המנהג להדליק בטפח הסמוך לפתח. But he says the custom anyway, right? That, is to do it anyway. כמו בימיהם, like in those days. ואין לשנות, it says you shouldn't change it, אלא אם כן רבים בני שעדיף יותר להדליק כל אחד במקום מיוחד. But he says, unless there's a lot of family members, right? So then it's better to light inside because there's more publicity inside than there is outside, מקום, whatever, or not outside, but close to the outside. מקום מיוחד מלר נרות מייחד ביחד. ואין יכיר כמה נרות מדליקים. So he says, there's really no recognition, also, how many candles you're lighting. ומכל מקום, היזהרו שלא להדליק במקום שמדליקים הנרות כל השנה. But Ramah says one thing, right, which is an important thing to know. So he says, either way, right, whatever you do, you shouldn't put the candles in a place where you usually put candles there, because you can't really, tell that it's for Chanuka, right? So therefore, right, a person should put it in a different place than he puts other candles. So what does that mean, right? For instance, your Shabbat candles, right? you shouldn't put the menorah in the same place you put your Shabbat candles, because it doesn't look like, there's anything different there. Not really such a good idea. So everything, should have its own place, right? Shabbat candles has one place. Where do you put the Shabbat candles, right? The best place is on the dining room table, where you have your Shabbat meal. That's the best place to put it, or like close to the table or on the table, right? One or the other, right? Something like that. So you can actually use them somewhat. Yeah, because otherwise there won't be any recognition. That's the reason why I tell people, by the way, that they shouldn't light like the Rama also mentioned this before, that even though we said the Ashkenazim have a custom to light several menorot for each family member, as we said, right? That's their custom. But the Rama did mention there, and also here he's telling you basically the same thing. That if you're doing like that, you're lighting several menorot, don't put them in one place, because otherwise people get confused, like they don't know how many candles you lit, and for who and for what, and becomes confusing. They don't know how many nights there is, what the number is, this and that. So if you're doing several menorot, the Rama already said you should put them in different places. That would be the proper thing to do. Here also it's telling you, right, that don't put the menorah in general, right, in a place where you usually put candles. Nowadays, we don't light candles every day, right? We just light it for Shabbat, basically. So therefore, right, that also, you shouldn't put the Shabbat candles and the menorah in the same place for the same reason. That's the same idea. Okay, good. So it goes on here, the Rama. Um, it goes on. So it says the Shulchan Aruch here. Bet Knesset manicho bekotel darom, right? As we said, in the synagogue, where should you put it? On the south side, right? That's the preferred place to put. Or bedarom menorah, right? Sadran mizrach and ma'arav. So, as we said, right, that there are different customs also, but the prevailing custom is to put on the south side. And what I want to say regarding this, yeah, so, but of course, what I want to tell you is that if for some reason they can't place it on the south side, let's say there's no room there or whatever. So they could put it also somewhere else, but the preferred side is the south. That's what we're trying to say, right? Umadikin, because that's where it was in the temple. Umadikin umbarchin. So he says we light and we bless, right? In other words, so we light in the synagogue and we bless. So what's the chidush? What's the novel idea there? Of course you should bless, right? Why would you think you shouldn't bless? Because as we said, right, in the synagogue it's only a custom. So you may think, since it's only a custom, we shouldn't bless maybe, because the rabbis didn't decree this in the beginning. You know what I mean? So therefore, it comes to tell you, no, we bless anyway. Why is that? Because it publicizes the miracle, right? So it's a special thing. Because in general, right? In general, the rule is we don't bless for customs, especially the Sfaradim, right? By us, we don't bless, for any custom in general, as a general idea. So anyway, right? Says Rama here, Ben Adam Yotzer Benirod Shel Bet Knesset. Right? He brings what the Bet Yosef brought down, that you don't really fulfill your obligation when you do it in the synagogue, right? But you have to light again your house, right? As we said, and we did mention, right, that but a person who has no home, right, that night for some reason, whatever it may be, he can do it in the synagogue. But if right, he has a home that night to go to, then he should do it at his home. Even if it's like a hotel room or something, he should try to do it there. sometimes there's issues with fire extinguishers, fire alarms in the hotels, or whatever. So that's a whole different discussion, right? What do you do in a case like that? Yeah, that's a thought. That's a thought that arouses some thoughts. That one. Okay, so anyway, right, goes on the Ramah here. ונוהגים להדליק בית הכנסת בית מנחה למעריב. So he says the custom is to do in the synagogue when do we do it? Between mincha and arvit, right? After mincha, before arvit, we do it. ויש נוהגים להדליק בערב שבת קודם מנחה. But, so he says, and on erev Shabbat, the custom is to do before mincha. Why? Because otherwise it's already too late, right? Once Shabbat comes in, it's already too late to light, obviously. So therefore, we gotta do it before mincha. ואם רוצים למהר להתפלל לאחר שברך את השליח ציבור והדליק אחר כן, מהן יוכל שמש להדליק נשרים ושליח ציבור להתפלל. So says the Rama, right, an interesting side thing there. And let's say right there in a hurry to pray, Erev Shabbat in the synagogue. So he says the shamash, who's the right, the guy who works there, whatever they call him. He can, complete the lighting, because they're in a hurry, so they don't have time now for everybody to complete it. So the shamash can sit there, that's why, sometimes when I'm on Erev Shabbat, when I'm lighting the Chanuka candles, I don't really have time to do the deluxe, version, right, with all the singing and everything. So we do a quick job, just the blessings and run off, right, because we don't have time. We're running to shul or running here, running there. So the worst time, for the singing is Erev Shabbat, because we're running somewhere, right, wherever it is that we're running, whatever it is that we're running to do. So that's the thing. Okay, very good. So I guess we'll stop there. Bezat Hashem, thank you for coming tonight. Chanuka Sameach. Be blessed with wealth, health, happiness. Bezat Hashem. Pray for our brave soldiers, who are doing an incredible job there, right? We've seen the terrorists, right? The big bad terrorists now in their underwear, right? Holding up their arms, holding up their hands. The big tough guys over there, the big Nazis now, and they're in their underwear there. So yeah, that's a good thing, they're saying, well, they're embarrassing them. Good, they should be embarrassed, they should be ashamed that they're Nazis, I don't care about their pride. I don't care about their honor. They have no honor and no pride by me. So let them pose in their underwear and hold up their hands and give up. It's very good. Baruch Hashem. We'll see you tomorrow. Chazak Baruch. All the best.
Kavod Harav, thank you so much.
God bless.